Hey, how's it going, everybody? So in this section, we're going to go over something very important for any business, and that is crafting your ideal customer profile. Now, a lot of people I talk to, especially if they're a startup and they just have this crazy idea, I ask them, who exactly are you trying to sell to? And a lot of people will answer that question by saying, oh, we're for everybody. But the reality is, if you're for everybody, you're actually not for anybody. And so another thing people say is that the riches are in the niches. So in this section, we're going to help you define your niche, meaning we're going to help you create this ideal customer profile. And that is essentially is character that is your ideal customer that will buy your product or service. We're going to dive really deep into how you can exactly define who this person is, what their problems are, and how you're going to solve their pains. Because once you answer these questions, it's going to be incredibly more easier for you to sell your product or service to this person because you know exactly who they are, where they hang out, and exactly what their problems are. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive right in. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do when it comes to your ideal customer profile is let's go ahead and just define that real quick first. So an ideal customer profile is essentially an avatar or some type of character of who your perfect customer will be, along with specific details on their demographic, their interests, and their history. So if you already have paying customers, you're already a step ahead of everybody else. In the beginning, especially for startups, you might have a lot of customers, but you may not understand which one would be the best for you to actually specifically target. So what you want to do if you already have paying customers is you want to analyze the top 5 to 10%, depending on how many customers you have. And you want to just see which one of those 5 to 10% bring in the most revenue for your business and break down who they are and why they buy. Now, if you don't have any paying customers quite yet, what you want to do is you want to create an initial avatar based on your research. So don't worry, you will continuously improve your ideal customer profile over time. But again, if you don't have any paying customers yet, you just have to do enough research to create some type of avatar or character so that you have something to work with. And what you're going to do with that avatar is test it out and go after these people. And if it works, great, keep making iterations. Now if it doesn't work, then just make some changes and try again. So that's how you're going to define your IDC from the beginning, whether or not you have paying customers or not. Now, when it comes to your ideal customer profile, essentially what you want to do is you want to first identify the type of companies that will be a good fit for your product or service. And then from there, once you understand the company from a high level perspective, you want to dive in a little more deeper and understand who exactly are the individuals that are going to make the buying decision to buy your product or service. And then, within a company, obviously, you're going to select certain people that are going to be the right people you want to talk to and potentially pitch. And you want to separate those people for the other guys who are just not going to be relevant for your product or service. So again, you're going to have number one, ICP, ideal customer profile for companies. And then within that company, you're going to have an ideal customer profile for the specific individuals that you want to specifically target. Let's go ahead and move on into the ideal customer profile worksheet so that you can have a better understanding of how exactly you're going to craft this avatar that you're going to use to target your sales strategy for. Okay, so now that we are in the PDF, the ideal customer profile worksheet, which is downloadable, what you're going to be able to do is you're going to fill it out either on your computer or you're going to fill it out by printing it out and just writing it with pen and paper. Either way, it's really your preference. So essentially, this worksheet here is going to be 3 different pages, right? The first one is going to be ideal company profile. Second one is professional and personal information. And the last one is why your product or service matters. Why is it relevant for this specific individual? So with that said, let's go ahead and dive into each page and go into the specific details. So like I was saying before, for your ideal customer profile worksheet, you want to identify the company first before the individuals. So that is information like your industry, your revenue, number of employees, how their business makes money, what's their dynamic market. Remember, we talked about dynamic market and static markets. Next part is they currently experience X pain caused by Y problem. That's getting into the crux of what problems that they experience so that you can solve them later. And then you want to add any type of additional relevant information that is specific for your product or service or your industry. And you want to just put all this down here. So by writing it all down on this worksheet, you're going to have a clear understanding of the type of companies you want to go after. So that's going to be step 1. Now going into the second page of the worksheet. And this is going to be the personal and professional information part. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit more so you can see this a little better. So this is where you really get into some real detail on your ideal customer profile. And something I'll share is that you don't necessarily have to answer every single one of these questions, and you can even come up with your own questions if it's relevant for your product or service. I just want to give you a lot of different ideas if you're not sure where to start on things that you need to be mindful of as you craft your ideal customer profile. So it could be things like age, their sex, whether it's male, female, education, title, income, right? These are all like static information. But then we get even deeper. What's their decision-making power at the company? What major pains do they experience on a daily basis? Is this pain a latent pain or a realized pain? How long have they experienced these type of problems? What are their KPIs, key performance indicators? For example, some KPIs might be to grow by X amount of users per month, per year. Other KPIs might be to generate X amount of sales. So you have to understand what exactly their jobs are and how they are measured at their company. Who do they report to, whether they have a boss or who works under them if they are the boss? What does their buying process look like? Are they the specific individual that makes all the decisions, or do they have to meet with a team of people and they have to unanimously decide whether or not they buy your product or service? What is their work schedule like? How many hours per week do they work? Why that's important is because you want to understand if they're working a lot of hours, does your product or service save them a lot of time, save them a lot of money? Do they enjoy their work or not? This is important because if they don't enjoy it, this is where you can find the emotional pains. What impact does their work life have on their personal life? And in a perfect world, what would their ideal life be like? So as you can see here in the beginning, I started off with just factual information on this person, but as you get more and more deeper into this person's professional and personal information, you want to get into the emotion of why this person would want to buy your product or service. And because people take action based on pains they experience, that's why I ask all these personal questions like how many hours of work do they do per week? Do they enjoy it? What kind of impact does work have on their life? These are all personal information that is very important because by understanding an emotional pain from your ideal customer profile, you can position your product or service to solve for their pains. You could be solving business problems, but you can also be solving personal problems at the same time. For example, if someone's working crazy amount of hours per week, if your product or service saves them a ton of hours and makes their work enjoyable, they're going to be a lot more likely to buy your product or service. So again, use these questions as inspiration and fill out the worksheet as best as you can for your product or service. And if you have, irrelevant information that is not covered within these questions, go ahead and just put it down in your own worksheet for yourself. Lastly, we're going to go to the third page, which is why your product or service matters. Why is it relevant for your ideal customer? Because it's not enough just to understand who this person is. You have to clearly understand why is it that they're going to buy from you specifically versus anybody else. First question is, what is your product or service and how does it bring value to this person, right? Very basic question. Number two, how is your product or service a solution to the person's pain? Again, we're all about finding the pains and then solving it. Number three, can your product or service make a significant impact on this person's life? Why that matters is because if it can't, then you really need to go back to the drawing board to see whether or not you're solving a critical pain or not. Number four, how likely is this person to share your product or service to a friend? And that's really an interesting question because if your product or service is so good, almost every single one of your customers is going to tell their friends about it and say, wow, I used this product and service the other day. It's amazing. You have to use it. That's how good you want your product or service to be. The next one is, are there any reasons for why this person would not buy your product or service? So why I put this one in is because it's an objection, right? You want to make sure that you understand if any reasons for why someone wouldn't buy your product or service so you can make changes to your pitch or maybe your product or service itself so that you can eliminate these objections ahead of time. The next one, how do you make your product or service a no-brainer? How do you make it so that when somebody sees it, they can decide that they need to buy it within the first minute of talking to you and learning about your product or service? That is how good you want your thing to be. Lastly, how is your product or service different from your competition? Because it's not enough just to be good and to solve problems, because in a competitive market, everybody's solving problems, but you want to make sure that you have some type of competitive edge for why someone would buy your product versus anybody else. So once you answer all of these questions, you're going to have something really solid where you know that there's a market for whatever you're selling. They have a problem, you solve that problem, and you're better than your competition. At that point, even if you haven't created a product or service yet, conceptually, you should be in a very strong position where you know your customer, you know they have a problem, and you know that they're they're going to buy your thing versus anybody else because you're unique and you're better than your competition. Most startups actually never even think about this because from a strategic perspective, if you don't even have this down, then creating a product or service might be a waste of time if you don't answer these questions, because once you create it, you can't say whether or not people will buy it. But by having this framework and filling out this worksheet, you're going to be a step ahead of everybody else, because conceptually you can understand why someone would buy your product or service before you justify spending time to actually create it. So with that said, again, it's going to be a 3-page worksheet that you can print out or write directly on the PDF. And you definitely want to fill this out before you move on to the next sections of this course, because by understanding these questions, it's going to just help you clarify exactly who your market is and what kind of solutions you want to create. So with that said, that's everything we have to cover when it comes to creating your ideal customer profile. And I'm going to see you guys in the next section.